Hello, everybody. Welcome to this webinar on journal peer review, organized by the BIRA Early Career Researcher Network. My name is Sin Wang Chong. I'm based at the University of Edinburgh, and I will be your host today. I am the convener of the ECR network. So on behalf of the network and BIRA, I would like to welcome everybody. This webinar is part of a bigger series where we talk about academic writing in general. And this year in particular, we would like to focus on journal peer review because we think that it's a very important topic, but it's a topic that is not often talked about openly, especially with early career researchers. So this series, we really take a case study approach to look at individual journals and to invite editors of individual journals to talk about their experiences, their stories, their narratives, so that we can learn more from them. And also, I'm sure, especially for today's two guests, they are editors of two very, very well-known journals in higher education. I'm sure you have heard of the journal, or maybe you have submitted to them before. So I'm very happy today to have Professor Malcolm Tite and also Dr. Jitsun Jung to be with us. So welcome. I would like to say a few words about the structure, and then I will hand over to our guests. We'll first have Professor Malcolm Tite to talk about his journal for around 30 minutes. And then Dr. Jitsun Jung will be sharing about her journal. And afterwards, at the very end, we'll have a Q&A session where you have the opportunity to ask questions, to share your experiences at the very end. All right. I would like to first introduce Malcolm. Malcolm, are you here? I
I'm
think.
here.
Yes. Okay.
Can you
Thank
hear
you.
me, see me?
I can hear you, but I can't see you.
No. My camera's on.
Um, Not for me. Yep, I can see you now. Yeah. Professor Malcolm Tite is a professor at Lancaster University, and he is the journal editor of Assessment and Evaluation of Higher Education, a journal that I really, really like. I've published there for a few times, reviewed for it. It's a very lovely experience. So I'm very, very happy personally that Malcolm said yes to my invitation. I will hand over to you, Malcolm.
Thank you, Sinwen. I'm glad to hear your experience was so lovely. I'm sure we could find people for whom it wasn't so lovely, but I guess that's part of the peer review process. Uh, I should start by confessing to being a serial offender in terms of editing journals and indeed books. I've edited assessment and evaluation in higher education for about 10 years now. And for part of that time, I was also editing another journal, Tertiary Education and Management, so I was doing two at once. And before then, I edited Studies in Higher Education for about 12 years. And before that, I edited Higher Education Quarterly. So I've spent nearly 40 years, all my career basically, editing higher education journals. So I should know something about it, but we will see. Anyway, to focus on assessment and evaluation in higher education, this journal, and Jason will probably say much the same for higher education research and development, is what you might call a highly selective journal. If you get accepted and published in assessment and evaluation in higher education, you're doing pretty well. And the statistics tell you why. At the moment, we receive about 800 new submissions every year, and there's space to publish about 80. So, put very simply, you've got about a 1 in 10 chance of getting in there. So, this does mean that a lot of my role as editor is managing this huge through flow of journals and trying to not put too much workload on people who review for journals. And I would say it's You know, it's a pleasure to get people to review articles for journals, but it's not always easy to get them to do it. You know, so every time I send an article out for review, I'm trying to get at least 2 reviewers to accept and review it. So on average, I have to ask 4 people to get 2 to accept. You know, it's that difficult. So anyway, the peer review process, the way it works for assessment and evaluation is basically this. You send in an article. I, as editor, do a first review of it within 2 weeks, unless something very fun is going on. I get to everything within 2 weeks. And at that stage, I reject about 60% of all submissions. And I reject them for a variety of reasons. Sometimes they're just not relevant for the journal. You know, they're not focusing on assessment or evaluation, or they're not even focusing on higher education. Sometimes they're very poorly written, so there's a kind of quality threshold I have to use. And sometimes they may be about assessment and evaluation in higher education, but they don't appear to have ever read the journal they've sent the article to, which, you know, is, at the very least, it's rude, or you might even say is kind of offensive. So that's one tip for if you're wanting to get an article accepted by a journal or considered by a journal, make sure you've read that journal, certainly more recent issues of it, and make sure you reference relevant articles from the journal you're sending your article to, because it, as an editor, it really irritates me when authors don't do that. And I think, you know, this is an article we might be interested in. This is an article which is relevant to the journal, but they seem to be ignorant of all the stuff we've published on this topic over the last few years. So about 60%, as I say, gets rejected within 2 weeks. The rest goes out for review, and hopefully at least 2 of the reviewers I've identified agree to review it. And I aim to get that review process done within a couple of months. So within 10 weeks of submitting it, you ought to have an initial decision. And because, as I say, we're highly selective, at that stage, the initial decision is normally reject, but a minority of people don't get rejected. They get asked to make more or less revisions and then resubmit for a further potentially round of review. But often I just do that myself to speed up the process. So it's kind of like going down a funnel. You know, you start at the top with all the other 800, and the further in you go, the less of you left, and the easier it becomes in a way. It might sound very harsh. It can be very harsh, and often the judgments I make are fairly marginal. You know, it's often the case that you get one reviewer says minor revisions, one says major revisions, but you read the detail of the review and actually they're saying rather more than that. And you could go with it, you could say, okay, revise it and resubmit it, or you could reject it. You know, it's not a clearly or objective process. It's not easy to get everything right. And of course, these are people's work, people's hopes, and certainly you're working with here. So it's, you know, we try to reject people nicely, but you don't want to be too nice, or they come back and say, well, you know, that wasn't so bad. Why don't you let me resubmit it? So it's a management process. That's how we do it here. I've already given you one tip for submitting to journals. Make sure you've read the journal. You know, that would include the advice the journal gives. Many journals, including my own, are happy for you to contact the editor in advance of submitting something, and that happens quite a lot, and it allows me to suggest to people they go elsewhere. a different sort of journal, or to say, yes, you know, if you maybe tweak it a bit, do this, do that, it could be the sort of thing we'd consider. So that can be a helpful initial process. And you might also make a judgment that if a journal editor isn't willing to be approached before you submit, do you really want to submit your article there? You know, because shouldn't editors be approachable and try and help you? That's another piece of advice. You know, and I would have to say I'm in this business myself. You know, I submit lots of stuff to journals too, and I get rejected loads of the time. And even though I've been doing this for 40 plus years, it doesn't really get much easier. You know, it still hurts. Typically, when I get the reviews back and I see the top it says we're not going to proceed, you know, I normally sort of file them away somewhere and only get round to reading them like a month or two later when I feel brave enough. So, you know, it's not just early career researchers who have hang-ups about this sort of thing. It's all of us. My tip there would be you might choose one journal initially, but have a number of journals in mind. So, you know, if journal A says no, you've immediately got journal B in mind, and you might look at what the reviews say, you might make some changes and then send it off. You know, it's a continual sort of business of lots of potential submissions floating about there, and you just allocate and reallocate them, and you will be surprised. You know, you might get a very strong rejection from one journal, but another journal accepts you with very little in the way of revision. You know, it is a subjective process. You can get the two reviewers who really hate your stuff, or you can get the two reviewers who really love your stuff, or any combination in between. You know, and you just have to get used to that and get on with it. And you know, once you've got a few under your belt, you begin to get a sense that you can do it more and more. I think I've probably said most of what I wanted to say, Xinruan. So I can give you more time for questions and answers once Jisung has spoken.
Sure. Thank you very much, Malcolm. That's very helpful. I think it's a very useful overview, and also in that overview, Malcolm gave us a few tips as well from his perspective, which I think it's really useful. So I will hand over to Jitsun. So Jitsun is one of the editors in chief of another journal that I really like, Higher Education Research and Development, and I'm part of the editorial team as well. So Jitsun is heading the journal. So I'm very happy that Jitsun also said yes to my invitation. So I got two of my favorite journals in higher education in the webinar. So I'm really pleased. So I'll hand it over to you, Jitsun. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Xinruan, and thank you so much for the kind invitation. So, can you see my slides?
Yes.
Okay. Good, excellent. Well, Professor Malcolm Tyler has 40 years of experience as the editors. I have only 4 years of experience. So he can provide a lot of this insight of experience. On the other hand, I can provide some latest experience that I'm going through as a new kind of editor in the job. So I'm going to introduce briefly about my journal, Higher Education Research and Development, and then maybe some issues I can share with the Professor Malcolm Tyler and Xinruan as well at the audience about publication, publishing, and reviewing the article in general sense. Where my colleagues call my journal as HERD, so Higher Education Research and Development, we have this acronym HERD. It's published by Taylor and Francis, and it actually started 1982, so it has a quite long history now. But the journal started, well, some of you already know, it was initiated by the Higher Education Research and Development Society of Australia. So for a long time, and still, authors and reviewers and the community of this journal quite a majority of them are Australians and also from New Zealand. But for last, I would say like 10 years, we are expanding more and more. And now we have a lot of international authors and reviewers, and the community is becoming bigger and bigger. Where we wanted to have articles that makes a significant and original contribution to the field of higher education. We have 7 issues per year. One of them is we call like special issue, and 6,000, 7,000 words of the manuscript. We have an editorial team. Executive editor is Professor Wendy Green. She's from University of Tasmania. And we also have one managing editor, special issue editor, and we have co-editors, and I'm one of them. We also have a big group of associate editors, and then they are helping and monitoring all the review process with co-editors. And Sin Wang is one of our members as associate editors. We have this history of as Australian focused journal, and then we have these team members, including Sin Wang. And I think I was explaining this slide about journal metrics. So according to the Google Scholar ranking for the higher education journals, we are number 4th. And I think number 3 is the assessment and evaluations in higher education. Well, we have these numbers like impact factor by year, and a lot of people pay attention to this kind of journal metrics. So I just brought these numbers for your reference. We, last year, 2021, we received 872 manuscripts, and then 200 revised articles from 2020. So in total, we had 1,072 manuscripts. We have an acceptance rate of 13, which is not that high. I think it's the same as the assessment evaluation of higher education. But it's not only these 2 journals. It's very common, especially the journals with high impact. Now they have a very high task rejection rate. Also, review process takes quite long, and review is also quite strict. Higher education research and develop. If you go to our website, you can see this, who is the audience of this journal, and then we identify there as audience. We aim to inform and challenges researchers, teachers, administrators, policymakers, and about all higher education issues, including the past, present, and future of the higher education. We wanted to have articles with significant and originality in terms of theory and methods. That's what all the editors expected to have in their journals. We also accept theoretical, philosophical, historical papers. Plus, we also accept these empirical researches by using quantitative, and mixed methods. All right. In our journal, we present our review criteria, and then it's written in our website. And actually, this is the criteria the reviewers receive from the journal. So when we invite reviewers, we ask reviewers to evaluate each manuscript based on the following criteria. So for example, first, the most important criteria is something new, something original, something significant to the field of higher education studies. And then literature should be based on higher education field, and sound methodology, and well-supported, well-argued conclusion, and coherent old paper, the argument. And also, we also expect authors to write something about broad to the international higher education audience. Let me just elaborate a few points that I just mentioned. For example, when we say general higher education, we don't accept papers that are very much other discipline focused. For example, psychology, education technology, language education, teacher education. We receive a lot of manuscripts pretty much dominated by their own specific discipline, not really following the general higher education discourse. Those papers, we don't accept them. And also, when we say higher education literature, it's same issues. Many authors, their literature reviews are highly dominant by their own field. All the concepts, theories, conversations all follow like psychology and technology, not really general higher education literature. And when we say a broad international higher education audience, some manuscripts are interesting. There are something potential, but they are most likely very much national focused cases. So what's new and what can you give to the international readers and audiences? They are the quite reasons the editors reject the paper or send it back to the authors and ask them to revise substantially. So they are the most important criteria. Our journal has this long tradition of recognition to the authors and also to the reviewers. So every year we select best article and we also select best reviewer. Shinwang was one of them 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and then they received an award from the association. So this is one of something that our journal recognized authors and reviewers. So what are the really common reasons that papers are rejected? I'm saying rejected here, most likely task rejection. We also reject like almost 45% of papers in a task, meaning it's not sent to the reviewers. First of all, we see where there is something originality. Are you talking about something new to the field? That's the first reason that we reject the papers. And then many authors, they do the case studies, but some case studies are not really contextualized, not really theorized. Those papers are rejected. And then some quantitative studies without any critical discussion, meaning you do some statistics and you present a lot of tables, but not really talking meaningful stories there. And we also do not accept papers that is based on only one single discipline or single institution studies, which do not really provide implication for the broader field of higher education. There are some exceptional cases though, and qualitative studies, just very descriptive. For example, many researchers and authors, they do some semi-structured interviews with a few people, and then the paper is full of just interview transcriptions without providing anything important or interesting findings. Those papers are normally rejected. And some authors, they still send the papers based on secondary education and vocational education. Those papers are rejected. Before we had book reviews, we do not have anymore. And those cases, those papers, we sometimes introduce some other journals to the authors. So when you select which journal is good choice for your manuscript, I would suggest the first one, but this is already explained by Professor Malcolm Tide. You have to skim the kind of table of contents and see what's there in your, I would call it target journal. So what kind of articles they publish? Does your work engage with a sort of conversation in that particular journal? Where when I say this, a couple of months ago, some audience, I think they misunderstood the meaning. They accept this as like, we have to cite your journal articles, previous manuscript, previous papers, but that's not about like citing our work or not. It's more about like dialogue and conversation. Are you talking same dialogue? Are you talking same things with our community people do? This is all about the same community and same dialogue that we are using. So try to skimming all this previously published work in that target journal, and then see whether your research is suitable and aligned with the previous manuscript, previous papers that were published in that particular journal. And then pay attention to the journal's aims and scope. Some journals, they say about, they have about pages to explain what that journal aims to publish articles. And also think about your primary audience. Are you really talking about general higher education issues, or do you have your own specific discipline, sub-discipline there, or multidisciplinary studies? So think about your primary audience. Who is going to read your work? And then if you are confused with your primary audience, one of the strategies that I recommend to my colleagues, go to your reference list and then see your key references and see where they are published. They are most likely your community, and then they are most likely your target journal. And you have to see how the articles are written in that particular journal in terms of structure, style, lengths, and then see if you can model. And number 6 point is not for everybody, but some institutions, some departments, especially for early career researchers these days, you might have to consider some impact factor journal rankings if you like or not. So it depends on where you are. And then this is one of the considerations that you have to see. Well, we have some challenges as editors. First of all, we receive some papers. It's well written from the beginning to end. It follows all traditional structure, nothing really serious problem. But from the beginning to end, we can't help asking like, so what? Like, what's the new story? What do we learn from here? Isn't it the same story that we are talking for last, I don't know how long? And isn't it the same discourse that we are using for decades? So what's the new findings here? Although the paper follows all structure and it's very well written. So how do we handle these papers? That's one of the challenges. And second challenge is something different. Paper has some potential there. Original approach is there, some interesting stories there, but not following the standard of journal manuscript. And then how do we handle these papers is another challenge. Lately, we have these kind of issues a lot, plagiarism. We have a screening process by using the software, but the authors, they kind of misuse this software, so they know how to avoid this similarity index that we call, but ideas are very similar and contents are very similar as the previous publications. So this is one of the challenge. And next one is some authors, okay, your paper is rejected in this journal, and then next time you try a different journal, that's okay. I do it all the time, of course, but I don't know how many times. Most importantly, even if you get the reviewers comment, you don't improve really paper based on reviewers comment. Instead, you just try different old journals until you make it. But it's better to be careful because sometimes that paper might go to the same reviewer in a different journals. Okay, and editors have another pressure from publishers because they want quality, of course, but at the same time, they want to marketize these journals, and these publishers' logics that academics normally do not follow and do not understand. So that's another challenge. Last two challenges is also really apparent. One is finding reviewers. All the academics these days, they are occupied with so many work, so many tasks, so they simply decline to review. So identify and finding reviewers, it's very challenging. And then even if we have reviewers, some reviewers have very poor quality of reviews. So you are the authors of the manuscript, but at the same time, you will be the reviewer of the manuscript. So I just wanted to share like two to three slides about review issues. So how can you be a good reviewer, or what are the bad examples of reviews? So good reviews. If you get the review invitation, which you might be soon. As soon as you have publications out there, normally editors find you when there is a manuscript that fits to your research interest. You might be invited to review the manuscript about that particular topic. Mind the time, whether you accept or decline the review invitation, it's better to respond quickly so that editors know. And then deadline for the review completion, it's one of the important things. Imagine if you are the author, you are waiting for the review, right? And then when you give the review comment, should it be clear and should it be specific, constructive, also international. And also you have to show some integrity, whether there is a conflict of interest or not. That issues you should be really carefully considering and let editor know if you can't accept the review invitation because of the conflict of interest. You better to inform the editor immediately and be consistent. For example, some reviewers, they say everything is great, and then when the review criteria, there is a kind of checkbox and score, and they give all the bad score. They kind of small inconsistency. Better to be careful. And if you have some additional comment that only you wanted to talk to the editor, then you can always use the communication channel for the commenters to editor. On the other hand, there are some examples of bad reviews. When you show it's not really common, but some reviewers might have this bias about language and gender, ethnicity, for example. That's the kind of example of bad reviews. And expressions like very unprofessional and disrespectful expressions, better to avoid. And only pointing out the language problems. You only point like vocabularies and grammars instead of talking about research itself. That's not really constructive comment. And you reject the paper because what author arguing is just against my belief or my philosophy. That's another bad example. Or too brief, not providing any comment. And inconsistency, I think I mentioned already this. And sometimes some reviewers ask really unreasonable revisions. You know it's not going to be possible, but you ask the authors to do something completely new study. That's not really good reviews. I just wrote some examples of bad reviews. You just criticize or compliment manuscript without enough explanation. Can you see some examples like? I do not have any negative comment. I'm saying this review that I got was actually, that was the whole review. Or like a very clear work, well done. There is one typo in page 3. And it doesn't give any constructive comment to the authors. And in this case, editor have to start all the process again, finding new reviewer, and then start all the review process from the beginning. So better to provide this constructive and useful, helpful feedback to the authors as a reviewer. Our journal actually have this reviewer process. We recruit early career reviewers. So if you are interested in, please find our website, and then you can contact our managing editor. What we do, we invite these early career reviewers, mostly like PhD candidate and also postdocs, and then they join the team, and then we give like trial period. We normally assign like 2 to 3 papers to try the review, and then you will get the feedback from the editors about your review quality. And then when you're good to go, you can be team of the College of Reviewers that my journal has, which is a list of potential reviewers in each specific topics in higher education. So it's one of the way that you can join in our community. Okay, I think this is all, and then I'm happy to have more discussion and Q&A with Professor Tite. Thank you, Shinwan, and thank you all.
Thank you very much, Jisun. Thank you so much. All right, so I think we have plenty of time for discussion, and I think that's good because sometimes, you know, your questions can be more related to situations faced by early career researchers. So I'm very happy to welcome questions in the chat, either so you can type your questions or comments in the chat box, or if you would prefer to say something yourself, you can use the raise hand function, and I will call out your names, and you can ask the questions yourself. I would like to, oh, okay, there is one from the audience already. That's good. Linda, you're good to go. Go ahead.
Hi. Yeah, I've just got a question about impact factor and choosing which journal to go for. You know, how do you make that decision around, do you target very high impact factor and potentially have a long delay whilst you get rejected from that? Or when do you decide to go in at the middle and get something published potentially quicker?
Malcolm, would you like to start?
Yeah, I can do. My advice would be to have a portfolio, and yeah, for some things you felt really good. I mean, we all know some of our stuff isn't as good as other stuff we write. You might aim to send articles you thought were really good to the top ranked journals, and others to other ranked journals. I wouldn't say all the top ranked journals take a lot of time. I mean, the one I edit tries to do it within a couple of months. So that, I mean, that's not really a lot of time at all.
I think I'm thinking of the time being that you go around several cycles rather than an individual journal taking time.
Yeah. I mean, obviously in these days with predatory journals and online only journals and new journals cropping up all the time, it's quite possible to get anything published somewhere. But you would prefer, I would assume, to get it published somewhere which has some credibility. But there again, that still gives you an awful lot of choice. I'd also, I mean, for UK-based people, the Research Excellence Framework, the REF, is often also a consideration. I was on the REF panel back in 2014, and it's still the case now. The policy was that there was no consideration given to the impact factor, the ranking of the journals that people had published in. Everything that was submitted for consideration was considered on its own merits and graded as appropriately as we could. So it didn't matter from that point of view. But yeah, I'm aware that many departments, many institutions have much stricter policies, and if you wish to get promoted, you wish your career to proceed, you have to get published in Q1 journals a certain number in a certain period. Yeah.
Well, yeah, from my experience, I also kind of divide the strategy, and it also depends which career you are in. I'm talking about myself. So if you're applying for some jobs, for example, and you need publication, those cases, I wouldn't say like you can wait for them like 6 months, 8 months, 1 year, more than a year, because sometimes it takes more than a year. Those cases, you can try some like middle range of the journals. It's also one of the strategy. But most cases, I think as authors, you know which quality, you know what quality you have in this paper. So my strategy is kind of divide. If you have some paper that you really wanted to try in a top quality journals in your field, I spend a lot of time. At the same time, I don't mind taking long time for the review. But some other manuscript, sometimes you work, yeah, it's okay, but it's not really my best work. Those cases, I go for the mid-range journals as well. So you divide strategy and you divide, sorry, portfolio. I think that's one of the strategy.
Yeah. Thank you both, because I think, you know, it's one of the hardest things is deciding where you might publish, and you know, you can check that you're within topic, but then choosing between the ones that are in scope is quite difficult to navigate.
Yeah.
I have a follow-up question. I think it's related to how to decide on which journal to submit to. So one of the, I think Jitsun talked about the scope a little bit on one of your slides. You talk about HERD is more like a general higher education journal, and it doesn't publish, you know, works that focus on a specific discipline other than higher education. I do realize from reviewing for both journals that there are publications in language education. There are quite a lot of them. You know, English teaching and feedback, and you know, so I have seen quite a lot of them, reviewed quite a lot of them, and seen some of them published. I wonder, so for a researcher who is working on different fields, for example, myself, I'm in language education and higher education. I publish in journals in both fields. I wonder how early career researchers can decide on whether this journal is the right one. I mean, apart from the obvious fact, as Malcolm said, that we can ask the editor about it, but how are there any factors that we should consider?
Well, that's a very good question, and that's one of our a lot of this discussion in the editorial team, because previously we accepted a lot of papers about this language education, language development as well, but I think we are in the meantime, we became quite a luxury position because we have a lot of higher education general issues. It's not really something directly to the language development, but you have to, if you are targeting the higher education journals, you have to use the language from higher education. Let me just give you an example. Like you talk about language education, if all the references are from applied language, for example, and language teacher education, English teacher education journals, and then meaning you are using all the vocabularies and terms, all the logics from linguistic point of view, not really higher education point of view. But if you are talking about language education teachers' academic identity, for example, or if you are talking about assessment of the language education, but very much like a student's point of view in a higher education classroom setting, that's more like higher education journals. What I suggest, check your reference. Where are your references? If you're like 70% of references, 80% of references are from applied linguistic study, language education, teachers' professional development. If they are using references from assessment, evaluation, higher education, or higher education research and development, talking about more general sense of higher education, then you can try the higher education.
Yes, I think the referencing thing is an important indicator. Added to that, I would say that the great majority of writing on higher education is within a particular discipline. You know, people are writing about their own department, their own course, whatever. So the other key thing I think you've got to try and do if you want to get published in a more generic higher education journal is to make it clear what the relevance of your study is to people who don't work in language or don't work in engineering or don't work in whatever your discipline is. You know, how can this be applied more generally across disciplines?
Yeah, I agree. And if I can follow up just one thing, I just gave an example of language education, but another disciplinary manuscript that we receive a lot is from psychology. So think about, like, you're talking about university students' well-being, college students' stress. We receive those manuscripts a lot, but if the manuscript is based on that kind of very typical psychology articles, like validation of instrument to measure stress, to measure well-being, those papers, we normally recommend them going and find the psychology journals. But if your article is framed as something about university students' study environment today, like whether their stresses are related with their career plans, labor market conditions, learning environment, if they are more talking about university environment, the campus life, and their issues of today's university life, then you can go for the higher education journals, because that's what higher education general readership is expecting to read.
Thank you. Thank you. So I see two hands raised. Gay, I think your hand is up first, and then Janet will follow. Thank you.
Hi. My question will be most specifically for Jisung, because it's about Herza, the journal, and also the special issues. As a young researcher, actually, as a doctoral student, timing is quite important for us. I mean, the early outcome is quite important. And for example, I myself thinking about submitting something for the special issue, the new trends in internationalization of higher education, which the deadline is kind of the end of this month. Anyway, but I almost finish it. But still, but then when I talked to my supervisors, they told me that it's gonna take longer than the normal journals. Is this the case? I mean, aiming to publish in special issue, because I was thinking this is gonna be much quicker than the normal ones. But then which one is the correct?
Yeah, well, I'm sure your supervisor had experiences in publishing special issue. So each special has a different timeline by journals, but in this specific case that you are asking, the special issue will be published next year, which is not too late, because the manuscript is should be supposed to be submitted at the end of this month, and the special issue will be out next year. So the timeline, I don't think it's problem in this case. Where when you submit article for the special issue, we have a different kind of a protocol. So the editors will read your manuscript, and if we decide to send it for the review for the special issue, then yes, we go through different kind of process. But if we believe or we think the article, the manuscript is not really suitable for the special issue, then we will send you your paper to the general stream. So any general issues. Then review might take shorter or longer following the general issues protocol. But for this special issue, no, it will be out next year. Yeah. So please go ahead, and then you will see what editors will say after the submission.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before I invite Janet to speak, I just have a follow-up question about special issue more generally. I think some of the early career researchers, they may be working on a very niche area with their supervisors. They're thinking about publishing a special issue with journals. I wonder what's the normal route. I know some journals, they have an open call for special issue proposals, whereas some journals don't. So I think I'm thinking for Malcolm and Jitsun, for the two journals, I wonder if there is opportunity to publish special issues with the journals, and if so, how can the early career researchers or people in general approach the journal?
Just approach the editor and say, I have this idea, might this be a runner? What further information do you want?
Okay.
Yeah, that's I think one of the common way. So you initiate, some people, they initiate whole special issue proposal. So you contact editor, we wanted to publish this kind of special issue with these kind of topics, and then editors will decide. Some other journals like Hearth, we decide a topic every single year of the special issue, and then we open the call to the whole community. So there are different kind of practices of each journal. So you have to check how the journal operates, especially differently. Yeah.
Okay.
We probably publish one only every 2 years or so.
Okay.
And most proposals get rejected. I seem to get an extraordinary number of special issue proposals on digital engineering and things like that, which is completely out of focus.
Yes.
Okay,
so,
thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. So Janet, I'm so sorry to keep you waiting. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, and thank you to Malcolm and Jisun for really insightful information tips that you've provided today. So that's been really, really helpful. Thank you so much. My question is more to do with becoming a reviewer. So I have completed my doctorate. I'm starting to publish from my doctoral study. I'm playing the waiting game at the moment with a couple of articles, and that's fine because that's the process. But my research interest is slightly divergent to the day job. So my day job, for example, is around, for example, curriculum design and review. But my research interest is more around race equality and not necessarily decolonizing the curriculum, but a broader scope around race equality. So my query is, if there was an opportunity or a call for reviewers for what is essentially my day job, but I don't publish at the moment in what is my day job, I publish in something else, is it worth me putting in, you know, a kind of expression of interest or not? Because obviously that's again, you know, we've got busy workloads anyway. We are just trying to manage and juggle, you know, our lives, and to then find the time to submit to somebody who essentially doesn't want to know you because you're not publishing in the field yet, but yet you know about the field because that is what you do on a day-to-day basis. So I just wanted to know what you thought about that particular scenario.
Oh, we want to know you, Janet. We always need new reviewers. So yeah, drop me an email and we'll sign you up.
Thank you, Malcolm.
Yes, if editors know your work personally, that might work. But if the editors don't know you personally, then they will only judge you based on your publication, right? Because they don't know what your area is. In this conversation, now we know what you are specialized in. Now we know, Malcolm and I, now we can invite you as a potential reviewer. But otherwise, most editors, I'm sure they will invite you based on your publication. And then editors, when you invite reviewers, I don't know how frequently Malcolm used the database. I normally don't use them much, but these days, the database automatically recommends this reviewer based on the publication of your keywords of your previous publications. So if some editors expertise. So I would say, yeah, you can contact editors individually based on your specialty, but if they don't know you, most likely it's based on publication.
Okay,
But
thank you so much.
once you've submitted something to a journal and you've put in something about your interests, you might have put in keywords and so, you'll be on the journal's database, and you know, if those keywords come up in relation to articles someone else has submitted, it will throw up your name along with everybody else.
Thank you so much. Appreciate the advice.
Thank you for the question. So keep the questions and comments coming. Currently, I don't think I see anything in the chat. No hands raised. So I'll just take the privilege to continue asking questions that I'm interested in, or I think early career researchers were interested in. So we're on the topic of peer review or serving as peer reviewer. And so just now we talked about how to get involved in terms of publishing in the journal or contacting the editor directly. So let's think about the next scenario. So if our name is known and if we get an invitation, and it's my first ever invitation from the journal that I absolutely love, how do I decide whether to accept it? Because of course, if it's my first time as a journal that I really, really admire, I would definitely want to accept. So, but in addition to that kind of feelings, I mean, what should we be careful as early career researchers when we think about which button to hit, whether to accept or reject or decline or to claim unavailable? What are some considerations?
I do think you've got to bear in mind your workload. You know, in common with many people, I get invited to review articles from dozens of journals every year, and most of them I turn down. So I prioritize particular journals I've done reviews for decades, you know, like Herd, for instance. I prioritize them, and ones I haven't had any dealings with, I'm very careful about accepting. So you have to bear in mind how much you think you can handle, and within that prioritize. Otherwise, you know, if you keep accepting everything, it will just snowball.
Yes, I agree. Well, as an editor, please accept. We need you, of course. But as an author and as a reviewer, I completely agree what Malcolm Tite said. It's also unfair. Well, personally, I accept a lot of those invitations because I feel like, okay, someone will review my papers. You know, I submit manuscript and someone has to review my papers. Then it's also my obligation to review someone else's work. So I accept a lot of invitations before. But again, like Malcolm said, you need your time management, and more you get to decline some review invitations. I feel bad, you know, to the editors and to the authors, even if I don't know who he or she is. So this whole peer review process, I think it's becoming very complicated and also tough for both sides. So you better to check your timeline, priority, and topic. They normally attach the abstract, right, when they send the invitation. So you read the abstract and then you have to decide whether you can review this paper or not. Sometimes I get these emails from the invited reviewers. They say like, oh, I'm really familiar with the topic. I know what this topic is about, but clearly from the abstract, this is using quantitative, all these statistics, but I'm a qualitative researcher. Do you want me to review this paper or not? And then normally editors will reply, okay, in that case, well, thank you so much. And then you don't need to review this time, but next time we will invite you. It's one answer. The other answer the editors sometimes give, oh, no worries. We invited another reviewer, which is very specialized in statistics. So you can focus on conceptual part, you can focus on literature review or theory part about this topic. So we will really appreciate if you can still do the review. So if you have some this uncertainty or questions before accepting invitation, you can reply to the editor and also ask them. It's also one of the way, yeah.
Thank you. I think it's, you know, communication it's the key message from listening to both of your replies. I think if you think you don't have enough time or you need more time and you really want to review it, write to the editor and ask for an extension if possible. If you're not sure whether your expertise matches, write to the editor and see what they think. So I think that's a very clear message from what I heard from both of your responses. Linda, please go ahead.
Yeah, I've got a question about, so if you've accepted a review and you've sent it back suggesting revisions, when it then comes back in, is it automatic that it's sent to the same reviewer? Or if I get the same one back again, is that because the editor has said, yes, I want that person to look at it again? So is it because they think, yes, I'll have a good second opinion on that? Or is it just, we've got someone who's willing to engage with this paper, I'll bounce it on?
I think journal policy varies there. In the case of assessment and evaluation, you wouldn't normally see it a second time.
Right.
It would go to someone else.
Yeah, it depends on journal. My journal, where priority is to send the manuscript to the reviewer that we asked the first time, because that's fair for the authors. You know, first round reviewers ask a lot of things, and then if the revised version goes to different reviewers, you might get completely different views. Then it's a bit unfair for the authors. So we try to invite same reviewers, but some reviewers, they decline to see revised version. Then editors also are not really sure if this paper is good or not. And in those cases, editors will send the paper to the third or fourth reviewer. It's also possible. So it depends on the journal and also the case by case of the manuscript as well. Yeah.
But if you don't want to see it again, you can decline.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
of course. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've recently had one that came back to me, and I thought about it, and I actually felt it would be better for the author to have someone fresh look at it, because the comments I'd made, I thought, I don't think you could have addressed this in the amount of elapsed time that there was. So I felt actually it would be better for them if it went to someone else. Plus, I actually
Yeah.
don't have time to do it right now as well. But I just wondered whether it had been an automatic, you bounce it back, or if it's a yes, actually we want it to go back. But clearly it depends on the journal.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think on this same topic, I have had experiences both as editor and author, having the manuscript reviewed by different sets of reviewers, and they come back with different, very, very different outcomes. So, for example, the first round, the 2 reviewers said very happy with it, minor revision, very happy as an author, submitted a revision. It went to 2 different reviewers. They said it was disastrous. I didn't want it to be published. That to me was very difficult to handle, both as an editor and as an author. So I wonder, as a journal editor, what is your role in mediating all this?
Well, one thing I would say is that authors can always take up these issues with editors if they want. And when an author comes back to me and says something like, I don't think those reviews were entirely fair because, and they go into some detail about it, I listen very carefully, and I'm open to reopening the review process if the argument they're making is fairly convincing. Because you're always aware, as academics, we all have different opinions. Some of us have preferences for particular kinds of analyses. Some of us prefer other sorts of analyses.
Yeah, I agree. I think the best way is to contact the editor and show your concerns, because editors also can read kind of between the lines. For example, reviewers recommended minor revision, but if you see the comment in really carefully, it's not really minor revision, it's major revision. Sometimes it happens. Or you get the major revision, but reviewers, you feel like editors feel like reviewers really didn't read the manuscript carefully. It's also possible. And then editors also received this separate comment from the reviewers. So the editors have all this information, like comment is from reviewers only to the editor, and then they can also see the kind of between lines, the meanings. So they collect all those information and read the manuscript one more time by themselves, and then they make a kind of decision and mediate all the process. So the best way is to contact the editor and express your concerns. Yes.
All right, thank you very much. I think, for example, what I remember, what Higher Education Research and Development does is when they sent out a revised manuscript to a new reviewer, they always have this sentence in the invitation saying, this is a revised manuscript, and please focus your comment on how adequate the responses are, how suitable the responses are, and try to refrain from adding new observations. I think that's quite helpful, and I think that's fair to the author as well. But of course, sometimes we benefit from an extra pair of eyes. So I think that's this. I think that's the same message. Don't be shy. Be proactive. Contact the editors. And I think I heard this because I do a lot of talks with early career researchers on journal peer review, and I think one of the questions they ask so frequently is, should I contact the editor? Because I think editor is perceived as some sort of god mystical figure that, you know, we shouldn't really bother them, or if they have anything, they will contact us. So I think it's a very, very relieving to hear two journal editors say that please contact me if you have any questions or if you want to get involved in peer review. I think that's very, very reassuring to early career researchers. I'm going to ask one more question if there is no other question. We don't have to wait until 11:30 if nobody has any question. But I do have one more question since we're on the topic of peer review, and I'm thinking about the milestones. So we talked about how to get involved in peer review. We talked about decision on making a decision on whether to accept an invitation, how to make a decision. And I want to ask this question about after acceptance of invitation, that I start to think about what to comment on and what to write and include in my peer review report. And I'm sure both of you know that there aren't really explicit instructions on how to structure or what are the different parts of how long a peer review report is. This is one of the most common questions I get from early career researchers. How many words are you expecting? How many sections? So I think it's a relevant question. It's an important question, but we don't have anything like that. So I wonder, what advice would you give to first-time reviewer when they start to review and assess the piece and writing up the peer review report?
Jisoo?
So I go first? Oh, sure. So again, some journals, they have a very strict, not strict, clear kind of criteria for the review. So they have these 5 items, 6 items. Please comment on these aspects. For example, HEARD, we ask like 6 questions. I think I shared one slide, like, is it international, for example, does it provide implication for international audience? Does this research have a sound methodology? Does this have a in-depth literature review? So if the journal asks those strict, very clear criteria for the review, I think you can naturally follow the criteria one by one, like a Q&A. That's one of the strategy you can do. Some other journals, most journals that I review, actually they do not ask those clear criteria, and I think it's okay. It's fair sometimes. The length, I don't think it's really standard. It shouldn't be too long, shouldn't be too short. That's the only answer from my side. So the length is not really most important thing. I think the more important thing is quality of review. So review should be more like, I would say, like clear, specific, and constructive. For example, the worst reviews that I get basically like, oh, literature is not in-depth enough. Methodology is not rigorous enough. Methodology should be elaborated. Discussion should be extended. That kind of very broad and general, basically you're asking authors to write a paper, entirely new paper, not providing how to rewrite the paper. So those reviews, it clearly shows reviewer didn't like the paper much, but at the same time, they really didn't know what to say about the paper. That's the kind of impression the editor and authors receive. Of course, those kind of reviews, editors kind of screen and then send it to another reviewer. So reviews should be constructive and specific enough. I'm not saying like talking about grammar, correcting the English, correcting the language. I would say like more whether this paper is clearly written, whether research questions are clear, whether this author is missing very important and key references about this topic, or methodology is clear enough, specific enough, elaborated enough. If it's not, what's the problem, and what's the author, what author can really improve in this area, and you make a recommendation or something, you provide something for authors to consider to improve the paper. So that's the kind of quality of review, not really about the length itself, I would say. Yes.
Thank you.
I'd say the obvious, or one obvious way of approaching a review, if the journal doesn't give like 6 bits of guidance or whatever, is just to take it section by section. You know, what do you have to say about the introduction, the methodology, the analysis, the discussion? You know, take it like that. And I think in terms of length, I mean, you're looking for the equivalent of an A4 page of, you know, font size 12, that sort of thing, as a sort of, some people write an awful lot more. But, you know, it depends. I mean, I was reviewing an article for a leading higher education journal yesterday, and I was reading through it carefully, and I had half a page of comments on the abstract. And by then you're thinking, uh-oh, you know, so I skimmed through the rest of it, and I know you said reviews should be constructive, but basically I had to say, you know, this author or authors, they need help to completely rewrite and redraft this article. There's enough in it to be worth publication, but it's terrible. You know, sometimes you've got to be honest.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think what editors value most from reviewers' reports are really the quality, and you know, whether the comments are specific rather than you know, the length or the format. I think we're not really looking at the specific format or length, but really whether the feedback can really help inform the editor's decision, or whether the feedback can help the authors improve their work. So I think that's also very, very helpful. I wonder if there are other questions or comments from the audience. Okay. All right. Janet, please go ahead.
Yeah, hi again. So I just wondered if you had any advice on how to manage feedback if it is quite brutal. So we know that sometimes, you know, people get quite harsh feedback, and I was working with a colleague of mine who is a professor who shared his feedback, and I was so shocked. I didn't know what to say. And as an early career researcher, it was really quite unnerving that feedback like this needs to be checked as by it needs to be checked by an English speaker. So basically implying that it was not written by somebody whose language is first language is English. And also the comment was it's written like an undergraduate paper. And I'm sitting there quite horrified by some of that feedback. And as I say, you know, I've got a couple of papers in the system at the moment, and I need to prepare myself for shockingly unprofessional feedback if it comes my way. So are there any suggestions about how to build resilience around the type of feedback that you might get?
I once kept 10 years worth of review comments on articles I'd written, and I used them as a basis for an article.
Right, I shall look into that.
I quoted all these people who said horrible things about me in this article. I had great fun. I mean, I had people saying my thinking hadn't advanced since the Reformation. I mean, comments like that, and you know, I had to seek advice from colleagues as to what some of these comments meant. Somebody called me an English essentialist, and I thought, you know, is that good? Is that bad? You know, what does it actually mean? Yeah, you get some great stuff, you get some horrible stuff.
Yeah, I agree. Well, you get harsh comment because you are trying and you are sending manuscript to the journals. That's the reason that you are receiving those harsh comments. And the more you submit manuscript, the more harsh comments you will get. So I think it's not about, you know, it shows you are trying and then you are making improvement. I also got comment like, one of the reviewers commented on my paper, I think the author doesn't know what he or she is doing, basically, like to criticize my paper. And then when you read those comments, of course, it's quite disappointing and, to yourself, sometimes even shameful. But I don't think you don't need to take it kind of personally or like really this offensive way. It's just one of the comments, and then you take chance to improve your paper as much as you can. But if you don't think the review was fair, well, then you just move on. I think that's my recommendation.
Okay.
I
thank
think
you.
from my perspective, because I'm publishing from my doctorate at the moment, that's your heart and soul you've put into that for many, many years. And for me, it's such a personal journey in that as well. So if I got a response that was like, well, you write like an undergraduate, or I would be mortified, I think. So and Linda, I like your comment about the emergency bar of chocolate, so I shall take that on board as well. But thank you very much for those comments. And Malcolm, I'll look for your paper.
Laura asked about the reference of the paper that Malcolm mentions. And Malcolm, is that a work in progress or it's already published? Malcolm, you're on mute, I think.
Sorry, I'm just writing in the details.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. All right, and Alison, I think your hand is up. Please go ahead.
So this might be a very naive and rookie question, but I think you mentioned quite early on about the problem being about people shopping around for like sending their article to multiple journals. So does that mean that you submit it to one journal, wait all the waiting period before you do anything else or send it anywhere else? Is it very rude to send it to multiple journals at the same time?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
It's
You're
hard.
not supposed to do it, and it's surprising if you do it, how often you get found out.
Yeah, you shouldn't do it. When you submit one manuscript to one journal, you have to wait until the decision is made. That's yeah. So it's no answer. And I had an experience. I was reviewing one paper from one journal, and then I got invitation from another journal, which was same manuscript. It was shocking because it's not supposed to be like that. And I think the author was also unlucky because the paper was sent to the same reviewer. And what I did, I contacted editors in two journals, in both journals, and I informed them. And then the editors withdrew the manuscript in both journals. So it's not, you shouldn't do that. We shouldn't do that. So no, what I mean by shopping was after the decision is made,
Okay.
you can, of course, feel free to go for another journal. Of course, you should. But what I mean, when you try next journal, at least you have to show some improvement. If the paper was rejected in the first journal, you have to make some improvement based on the comment that you got from the first journal, and then send it out for another journal. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's really helpful. Thank you. It's an impression I got, but it's one of those tacit kind of things that it's hard to know for sure. So it's really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. I just popped it in the chat, Malcolm's piece with the link. So if you're interested, it's called Reviewing the Reviewers. So if you're interested, the link is there. I think just to conclude the session, if there is no more question, I think that there, as Alison said, there are a lot of things that are tacit that are not mentioned explicitly, but we're kind of expected to know about them. It's not part of the systemic doctoral training that we received, but we have to do it as an academic, submit, review, publish. So I'm very glad to have two guests here, and it gives me really great privilege to attend these sessions as a host, to listen to different stories from editors. So thank you very much, Jisun and Malcolm, for sharing your experiences editing your journals. Your experiences really help early career researchers, and myself included. In addition to, of course, talking to journal editors, and I think one of the messages that we get from today's session, it's don't hold it up. Just ask, just approach the editor. The worst that you can get is a no response. And, you know, it's a non-reply. That's fine. But I think at least for the two journal editors here today, I think you would get very prompt and very supportive replies from them. So I think if you have any questions, I'm talking to the ECRs here, that we just need to write to the editors and ask for clarification. And you can even mention, for example, it's my first time doing this and I'm not sure whether I'm doing it right. Can you please tell me? I think everybody would appreciate that you know, information. On top of that, of course, I just want to do a little bit of promotion of a platform that I set up with Shannon Mason, based in Nagasaki University in Japan. So we set up this scholarly peers platform. So we have a website collating resources all about peer reviews. The resources include journal articles. I should add Malcolm's paper there to our list later today. And it also contains blog posts by other people, recorded presentations. We also have a Twitter account, so people vent about peer review. They talk about their positive, negative experiences. We have a blog there on the website. We also have a podcast series where I interviewed different people. You can have those resources, and on top of that, of course, you have publishers organizing courses, online courses for peer reviewers as well. So there are quite a lot out there. So there are, you know, you're well supported as new researchers, but we just have to dig out those resources. So thank you so much again, Malcolm, Jisun, for being here. I know you're extremely busy, but thank you for taking the time. And thank you everybody for attending the session. And I look forward to seeing some of you in our final session in November as well. Thank you very much. Have a nice day, everybody.
Thank you so much.